Welcome back to another Family History Friday with the Butler Area Public Library. I'm Margaret. In this video, we are going to look at a few resources that you can use to help find more information about an ancestry who served in the Civil War. So the first few resources we'll look at are going to be helpful regardless of what state your ancestor lived in. They are going to cover nationwide. And then we'll look at a couple that are specific to the state of Pennsylvania. So let's take a look at those. The first record that you will want to look for if you have an ancestor who served in the Civil War is the 1890 Veterans Schedule. So this was a special census that was taken as part of the 1890 federal census, and it's one of the only parts that's actually surviving because we know that the 1890 federal census records were destroyed. So on the 1890 Veterans Schedule, we will find information specific to veterans of the Civil War. And we'll also find information about their widows if the veteran himself is deceased. It records information about their rank, the company and regiment they served with, and the length of service. And then there's also comments regarding any disabilities or injuries or other remarks. You can find the 1890 Veterans Schedule on Ancestry and Ancestry Library Edition. The names in the records have been indexed for searching, so they may come up generally during your search, or you can go specifically to this landing page for the 1890 Veterans Schedule via the card catalog and search just these records. You can also browse them by state and then county and township, similar to the way that you might browse a regular federal census record. This is what the 1890 Veterans Schedule looks like. It is stacked, so this information is a continuation, so we'll look at that in a second. But what is recorded are the names of the surviving soldier or their widow, their rank and the company or regiment they served, and the dates of enlistment and discharge. And then at the bottom is where we get disability and other remarks. Zooming in here, we can see that the first entry is for Sarah, the widow of Samuel Diefenbacher. He was a private in Company C of the 134th Pennsylvania, and he served from 1862 to 1863. Just below that, we see Alexander Russell, who was a corporal in Company K of the 134th Pennsylvania. He also served 1862 to 63. The third entry, John M. Greer, is interesting because you can see he actually was in the service twice. The first time with the 137th Pennsylvania from 1862 to 63, and then he re-enlisted with Company E of the 2nd Pennsylvania in 1864 until after the end of the war. He didn't get out discharged until February 1866. So you may find multiple enlistment dates for your ancestor. And then make sure you make note of the number in the left-hand margin because that is going to correspond to the comments at the bottom of the page here. So this is where you're going to find any additional information. Of note on this page would be the entries for lines 34 and 35 here for Anthony Schrump and Wilson Reed. We can see that both of them incurred a gunshot wound disability. The first, he was shot through both hips at the Battle of Five Forks. The other had a gunshot wound in his right ankle at the Battle of Cold Harbor. Looking at another page, we can see additional commentary at the bottom. So we have some soldiers who are suffering from rheumatism, some that also incurred injuries. This individual was taken prisoner. Somebody else is suffering from epilepsy. Someone had typhoid fever during the war. Someone has spinal disease because of exposure. So remembering that a lot of Civil War veterans incurred disability because of disease during the war and not specifically injuries from battle. And then there's also commentary related to other things. So for example, on line 30, we have Martha Yeoman, who's a widow, being enumerated here because her husband is deceased. But we can see here that he wasn't killed in the war. He was killed in a planing mill in May of 1889. So she is a widow of a veteran, but he was not actually killed in the service. Next, you're going to want to check other census records because there are 2 census years that give you clues to Civil War service. So in 1910 and 1930, there is a question regarding veteran status. In 1910, they asked if you were a Union or a Confederate veteran. And in 1930, they asked if you were a veteran of any war, and then they indicate which conflict that was. Now, just remember that depending on who provided the information to the census enumerator, there's always a chance that there might be an error here or it might not be recorded. If we take a look here, here's a 1910 census here in Butler, and the column that asks about military service and veteran status is the third from the right, way over here. So if we zoom in, it's this column here, column 30, whether a survivor of the Union or Confederate Army or Navy. And we can see here 2 people who are Union veterans. That's this UN that is being filled in. So that doesn't mean unknown, it's shorthand for Union. So we can see that William Graham and John Sutton are both being listed as Civil War veterans here on the 1910 census. So here's another example of a 1910 census, and I'm showing this just simply to reiterate that it's always possible that this information wasn't recorded. Down here at the bottom, highlighted in yellow, Eli Lewis Haynes. We do know from other research that he was a Civil War veteran, but that box is empty here on the 1910 census. But when we look a little bit further to the 1930 census, we can see that there is information filled in for him. So sometimes you might have inconsistent answers. You want to fall back on that 1890 census as your primary census record. You can see here in 1930 that there's a 2-column section for veterans. So whether a veteran of US military or naval forces, the first column is a simple yes or no, and then the second column asks which war. So we can see here for Eli that it's a yes, CIB, shorthand for Civil War. The next record you'll want to consider are pension indexes. So pension index cards include the name of the pensioner, their service information, so their regiment and rank, and then information about the pension request, so the date that they requested it, the location, and their request for pension final number. Now, pension indexes are really the only part of pensions that we can easily access. The actual records are not yet online. So if you want to view actual pension records, there's 2 ways to go about that. One is to request them from the National Archives through their online portal. You can see the web address here, which is eservices.archives.gov/order-online. I will include that link in the video description. You can also request them by mail by filling out Form NATF 85. But let's look at some examples of these pension index cards and see what we can at least glean from them. The Civil War Pension Index is available on Ancestry and Ancestry Library Edition. Again, it is indexed, so you'll find it in your search results, or you can go right to the specific collection via your card catalog and search for an ancestor. The collection generally is arranged alphabetically, so it's not subdivided by state, it is just simply alphabetical by surname. This is what a pension card looks like. So at the top will be the name of the soldier, and then in the center will be their service information. This is that Eli L. Haynes that we were looking at on the census records from 1910 and 1930. He served with Company D of the 58th New York Infantry. And so down here we can see the filing information. So the date on the left-hand side is the date that they filed for the pension. In his instance, it was November 1st of 1890. That date might tell you something contextually depending on where it was in their life, when that need for that supplemental pension payment was coming. The invalid class is referencing your Civil War veteran themselves. The application number and the certificate number here, the certificate number is the one that you will use if you are applying for copies of this pension via the National Archives. And pay attention to the state where it was filed from. So you might find that they had moved around. So obviously Eli served in New York State during the war, but by 1890, he lives in Florida. Looking at another one, this one includes 2 pension payments. So we can see here that the soldier was William L. Allen. His widow is Mary E. Allen. William served in the 32nd Pennsylvania Infantry, and he applied for a pension in March of 1880. We can see his information on this line here. But then Mary Allen applied for a widow's pension after William passed. So she applied for that widow's pension in September of 1898. So this tells us that there's 2 pensions relevant to William's service. It also immediately helps us narrow down when William died, because Mary was applying for a pension in the fall of 1898. He must have passed away before then. The final pension card index here. This is the pension index for Milton J. Edmonds. He served with Company G of the 58th Pennsylvania. And this one I'm pointing out because we have his invalid pension that he applied for in 1880. And then, although we don't have a widow receiving a pension, we have a minor. So minor children were eligible for pension payments. So we can see here that the guardian of Milton's child, who was James H. Coffin, applied for a pension in 1907. I'm pointing this out, one, so we know that something must have happened to Milton before 1907, so that this minor is now eligible. And then usually what you are going to see here is the name of the guardian who was appointed for that minor child, not the name of the child themselves. So Milton's child is not James Coffin. James Coffin is the guardian who was appointed to legally represent that child. And we can see here that it was filed in Delaware. So this minor child was living in Delaware in 1907 when they applied for this pension payment. For those researching a serviceman who served during the Civil War from Pennsylvania, you have access to complete muster rolls from the Pennsylvania archives via Ancestry.com. Now, muster rolls are simply the official list of officers and enlisted men with information about their age, where they enlisted, and any additional payment details. These Pennsylvania muster rolls are available on Ancestry. And what's nice about these is they are more recently digitized, so they're full color scans. They aren't digitized microfilm. They are indexed for search, but you can also browse them by unit. So if you know the unit that your ancestor served in and you want to just drill down directly to that record, or if you are interested in not a specific person, but a unit as a whole, and you want to just look at their regimental records, you can use the browse to do that. So here is an example of one of our Pennsylvania muster rolls. This is for the 103rd Pennsylvania Company D. It's a very large sheet. You're going to find it organized with the names of the officers first and then the privates at the bottom. The information included is going to include their rank, their age when they enlisted, when they joined for service and where that was. So usually that's going to be a little bit closer to home, and who it was who enrolled them. And then the date that they mustered into service, which is going to be a little bit later, and where they mustered in. There's going to be information about the date that they were last paid, and any information regarding fees or what is owed in terms of payment for clothing, the value of equipment and arms that might have gone missing, things like that. So certainly analyze those for any clues. And then lastly, the big column on the side is where you find your remarks. This is where you're going to find information about promotions, about injuries, about illnesses, about people who were taken prisoner of war, about people who deserted. So you're going to find all kinds of service information noted here. A resource that is going to go hand in hand with those Pennsylvania muster rolls that we were just looking at is the book series, The History of Pennsylvania Volunteers, which was compiled by Samuel Bates. Bates put this book series together directly from those muster rolls that we were looking at. It has extractions of some of the personal information in it, but more importantly, it has a detailed history of each regiment. This is going to include information about where they mustered in and the counties that primarily made up each regiment, and then it's going to detail the battles and engagements that they saw. So if you are looking for more information about what the war experience for your ancestor would have been, the History of Pennsylvania Volunteers is going to be a key resource. So we can see here just one example for the 103rd Regiment. On the left-hand side, the image is the first page of a several-page history of that regiment. And then on the right-hand side, we can see the transcribed information that was extracted off of those full muster rolls. And then lastly, my general advice when you're doing this kind of research and looking for more information about a Civil War veteran is to check the Ancestry card catalog. So there may be a collection specific to your research that you're overlooking, and it may be that there is something that comes up specific to a state that you're looking at that I have not covered here. On Ancestry, we search our card catalog by going to Search and then choosing Card Catalog. And we can simply type in the words Civil War here in the keyword box and hit search. And you can see that narrows us down to about 181 record collections. Now I'm seeing some things here that must have something to do with the English Civil War. So to filter those out, on the left-hand side, I'm going to go to Filter by Location and click USA. So now we can see a tailored set of records that are specific to the American Civil War all over the country. And we have a range of states represented: North Carolina, New Hampshire, Indiana, Alabama, Pennsylvania. So no matter where it is that you're researching, there may be a specific collection tailored to your research needs when looking into a Civil War veteran.